Hello and welcome to another picture settings video on AVForums. I'm Phil Hinton, I'm the site editor, and today we're having a look at the LG G3 MLA OLED TV. We have reviewed the 55 and 65 inch TVs and measured the out of the box settings, and those are the settings that we're going to show you today. We're not necessarily going in and changing anything, we're just making sure that the TV is set up correctly. What you'll need to do to follow this is have some HDR footage available that you can feed the TV either through a streaming service or a Blu-ray disc of some description. You also need some Dolby Vision content. Again, you can get that from a streaming service or a 4K Blu-ray. You need to be feeding those signals to the TV to then get the menus to change the picture settings that we're going to show you. We're going to start with standard dynamic range, so just normal TV material. Just switch the TV on and switch it to any TV channel or whatever that is HD and not HDR in any way. And when you hold and press the settings button for 3 seconds, you are presented with this menu here. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into the general menu here. We're going to go all the way to the bottom. I'm going to click on energy saving. We're going to make sure that energy saving is switched off. The reason for this is that energy saving will adjust the brightness and it will take most of the dynamic range out of the image, and the whole point of buying a TV like the G3 is to make use of the higher dynamic range and the higher brightness of this set. So we're going to make sure that that is done. Now to picture settings. It's nice and easy. We're going to go to select mode and then we're going to go all the way down to Filmmaker Mode, and this basically gives you an image that follows the industry standards, and those are the industry standards that all content, whether it's TV, sports or film content, is created in, is mastered in and is intended to be seen. We don't really need to do anything else other than put it into Filmmaker Mode, because what Filmmaker Mode does is it makes sure that all the settings are correct. The image manipulation settings are switched off, motion is set correctly, and you can just put it in Filmmaker Mode and know that you are getting the right image. There are a couple of things that we can check. You could go to aspect ratio, you could change aspect ratio to original, which gives you pixel mapping, and you can go to just scan and make sure that overscan is switched off, so again that you're getting pixel to pixel with that. Going into the advanced settings, there's nothing for us to do in here other than just check that nothing is switched on that shouldn't be, and very quickly going through brightness, color, and then down to clarity, and we're just making sure that everything is switched off that needs to be switched off. That includes true motion, which is the motion handling. We want that switched off. If you suffer from 24 frames per second judder because of OLED's instant pixel response time, you could go into true motion and set it to cinematic movement. What this does is it adds a tiny little bit of interpolation, or so it makes up a couple of frames, just to take that little bit of edge out for those people who do see it. I mean, everybody sees motion slightly differently. If you do see stutter with 24 frames per second, even in the off position, which is 5.5 pull down, which is the way it should be displayed, because of the instant pixel response time of OLED, some people do see that. So you can try cinematic motion or movement if that is the case. And that's all we need to do really for standard dynamic range content. So what we're going to do now is we're going to feed the TV an HDR signal. And like I say, you need to get a 4K Blu-ray which has HDR, or go to a streaming service and pick a film that's in HDR10 or HDR, not Dolby Vision, and we'll go into that menu next. So we're now feeding the TV HDR10 signal. I'm doing that using the Spears & Munsell UHD benchmark disc. I'm using the montage footage, and with that disc I can go from SDR to HDR at different master and display values from 1000 nits to 10,000 nits. You can also select HDR10 plus if your TV and player accepts it, and also Dolby Vision at 10,000 nits. Right, so HDR10 is what we're looking at now, and again we're going to hold down the settings button for 3 seconds and it'll bring us straight up into the correct menu. Again, we've already done the power settings and so on. The only thing we need to make sure is HDR select mode, that we are once again in Filmmaker Mode. That's all we need to do there. And again, we're just very quickly aspect ratio, original, and just scan on. Advanced settings, Again, we're just checking that nothing is switched on that shouldn't be on, and yes, there is something that's switched on here. So dynamic tone mapping. This does change the creator's intent. Why it is on default with Filmmaker Mode, I'm not 100% sure on the LGs. But if you want to see content as it is intended and mastered, you need to switch dynamic tone mapping off. Where it might be useful is if you're in a bright room or you're watching during the day. Dynamic tone mapping may help, because what it does is it brings out a little bit more in the mid-tone area. So that may help. But if you're watching in a dark, dim room and you want to see it as it's intended to be seen, dynamic tone mapping should be switched off. We're then going to go down into colour. And again, there's nothing we need to change in here. And then we're going to go down to clarity and just make sure, once again, that everything that needs to be switched off is switched off. And again, if you want to use cinematic movement, you can do that. It adds a tiny little bit of interpolation, but not any soap opera effect. So the last thing we need to do here is Dolby Vision. And once again, we need to feed the TV a Dolby Vision signal. So once you do that, we'll come back with the next menu. So again, you can go to a streaming service and use some Dolby Vision content, whether that's Disney Plus or Netflix or so on. Those are the good sources of Dolby Vision. Or you can use a benchmark disc like I'm using here, the Spears and Mansell disc. So I've now switched to 10,000 nit Dolby Vision. So you need to be feeding the TV a Dolby Vision signal from somewhere. Right, so again, we're going to press the settings button for 3 seconds. And we're going to bring up this menu here. It says Dolby Vision Select Mode. The correct one, again, to see things as they're intended to be seen and mastered, is Cinema. And this is for watching in a dimmer environment. If you're watching in a brighter room, you could use Cinema Home, but be aware that using Cinema Home also switches on some processing that you then cannot switch off, including some motion processing. So if you want to see it clean as it's intended to be seen, as it was mastered, you want to be in the cinema mode. So that's Dolby Vision Cinema Mode. And again, just check aspect ratio is again set correctly. We're going to go to advanced settings, and again, there's nothing for us to change in here. We're just checking that nothing has switched itself on. You'll notice that dynamic tone mapping is no longer a selector under Dolby Vision. That's because Dolby Vision uses dynamic metadata, so you don't need that. And again, there's absolutely nothing for us to change in here, but we're just checking once again that nothing has switched itself on that shouldn't have. And that's it really. So, you know, the takeaway here is Dolby Vision Cinema Mode when you're feeding the TV Dolby Vision. If you're feeding the TV HDR, HDR10 content, then it should be Filmmaker Mode. And again, for standard dynamic range SDR, it should be Filmmaker Mode. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, then please do give it a like and maybe consider subscribing to the channel for lots more reviews, settings and our podcasts. Thanks for watching.